So to continue with the story of Abraham, remember Abraham was married to his wife Sarah, and they had a maid servant. Her name was Hagar. And as the longer Abraham and Sarah were married, they realized they could not have children. And Sarah asked Abraham if he could have a child with his servant called Hagar. And that was going to become a big problem. See, at the time it maybe looked normal, maybe they thought it's nice, but it's never nice, because God commands us to have one man and one woman. They become wife, and that's husband and wife, and that's how they have children. And they had a child, and their little son was called Ishmael. But then 16 years later, when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, God spoke to him and told him they're going to have a little son called Isaac. Whenever Isaac was born, his name meant laughter or joy, because they laughed at the thought of him being born in their old age. And of course he was. But the problem was, Isaac and Ishmael, there were 16 years between them, and Isaac kept being mocked by Ishmael. And Sarah, the mother of Isaac, never liked the way her son was being mocked. And now there's a problem between two women, Ishmael's mother, Hagar, and Sarah. And Abraham was the father of both the children. And Sarah came to Abraham and told Abraham that both Hagar and her son Ishmael must leave the camp. She was the wife, she was the boss, if you like. And Abraham had broke his heart because he loved Ishmael as his own son. And he also loved Hagar for the help she'd been, and also being the mother of the child. But you had to listen to Sarah. And he told them they have to leave. And very sadly, Abraham, no doubt, would have packed their lunch and give them water to drink. And to make a journey, they didn't know where they were going, but they were told to leave Abraham's campsite. And they started to make their long journey out into the desert, across the plains, not knowing where to go to. And suddenly they found themselves in the desert, in the wilderness. And the food that they were eating was quickly gone. And the water they were drinking was also gone. And now they were becoming tired. They're becoming weak. Did God forget about them? Of course not. God doesn't forget about his people. But as they walked, they knew they couldn't go back, and they knew they must keep going forward. And they had no idea where they were going to. And sometimes in life it can be like that. We've just no idea where we're heading, but we must realize that God is with us. But the point came, they got so hungry and so tired and so weak that they lay down, and they felt, this is after maybe several days, and they thought they're going to starve to death. And worse than starving was dehydrating, because their water pot was empty. And they found a little tree, and Hagar got her son Ishmael and put Ishmael under the tree to protect them from the sun. Remember, the heat of the day would have been scorching. With no water and a heat in the day, in a wilderness, in the desert, very quickly the body would soon die. And then do you know what happened? They began to pray. First of all, Hagar began to pray, Father, is there any way you can please preserve our lives, especially the life of my son? And no mother would like to see her child dying. And naturally, her only resource was to pray. Could God hear the prayers of this lady in the wilderness, in the desert? Of course he could. God can hear our prayers anywhere. And she began to pray. The Bible says the lad began to pray as well. Dear Father, please bring us water. Please give us food. Please preserve our life. Look after my mother. It's always good to pray for your mother. More than anyone else in this world, you should always pray for your mother. The Bible tells us the angel came and told Hagar to look up, and she couldn't believe her eyes. The Lord provided an oasis in the desert. Water in the desert for them to drink. Can you imagine the surprise she had whenever she went and woke up her son and she said, look what God's given us. He's given us water to drink. Water. God was looking after him. Even though Abraham's cast them away, and so did Sarah, God never forgot Ishmael. And God promised that he would also bless Ishmael as well, because he was Abraham's son. And as he went on in his life, God did bless him, and many ascendants came after Ishmael, until they became also a mighty nation. See, sometimes things in life don't always go our way, and we think we've been let down, disappointed, forgotten about. Well, God can use those things to bless us. God can use problems in our life to become big blessings in our lives. But we must always be faithful to God. No matter what circumstance we find our life in, we must always acknowledge God in everything. Remember, the Bible says, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths.